Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Behind the Business with the Boise Beat, where we delve into the journeys and insights of business leaders who are making a mark in their communities. And today we're thrilled to have with us Brian White, the enterprising owner of the Dutch Bros franchise in the East Treasure Valley area. And in case you don't know, Dutch Bros, they're renowned for their vibrant coffee culture, superb customer service, and they're a staple in the Treasure Valley area. So much of their success, we can say, is attributed to guys like Brian, their visionary leadership and entrepreneurial spirit. So today, we're going to explore Brian's journey into the world of Dutch Bros, his strategies for growth, some lessons learned along the way, and maybe a little bit more. So without further ado, I want to welcome you on stage here. There we go. Got you on stage here. How you doing, Brian?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you got it. Right off the gate, I got to say, I'm a big fan of Dutch Bros. I got my kicker already kicking
Perfect.
in this morning. Yeah, ready to go, ready to roll.
That's the classic going way back. That was the drink that put us on the map. So
Was it really?
it was, yeah. That was the first one that, I mean, not the first drink that they ever created, but it was the first name drink that really took off and started the success. So that's a good choice.
Yeah, nice. That's some good history lesson there. Well, speaking of history, I want to get into some of the history with yourself and kind of how you came into becoming a franchise owner of a Dutch Bros brand, such a remarkable brand that many of us know and love to date. How was it that you got started in doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, so I started actually from within the company. I was going to school over in Oregon at Oregon State, and got introduced to Dutch Bros while I was going to school a little bit in Corvallis. A girl I was dating at the time was working at one of the shops, so I got to know the brand a little bit. But my senior year, I ended up moving back to Bend, Oregon, which is where
Mhm.
I grew up,
Okay.
and Dutch Bros was just starting to open in the Central Oregon area. So I took a job with the local Dutch Bros, and it was just supposed to be a college job, just get through and I was a night guy, so I just was working nights the whole time and just trying to just get through college and much like many of our employees. So I
Mhm.
started there, and one thing kind of led to another. I got an opportunity to move to a new store that was opening in the area and got the assistant manager position at that store. And then the manager in front of me had some family stuff he had to go deal with, so he had to move back to Grants Pass. So I
Mhm.
kind of got pushed into the manager role of the shop, which was great.
Mhm.
I loved it. It was a little crazy because I didn't know what I was doing, but
Mhm.
kind of learn as you go type
Sure.
mentality. So got that. And during all that time, I actually ended up meeting my wife. My wife was working at the Dutch Bros as well. So
Wow. Huh.
we started dating, and I graduated college, or I was on a path to graduate. I was almost graduated and had met my wife. We'd been dating for about a year and a half, a little over a year at this point, I guess. And so we were getting pretty serious. And so everything was coming together of graduating college, getting married, and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And so it was a conversation with my wife, or my fiance at the time, one night, just like, hey, what should we do? And I had opportunities maybe in different directions. My dad was a developer contractor in Central Oregon for years and years, so I could have taken that path.
Mhm.
But we just kind of talked to each other and said, why don't we stick with what we know? We love the company. We love the culture behind the company. We knew Dane and Trav, especially Trav Boersma, who was the founder of the company.
Mhm.
Dane was his brother who passed away with the Lou Gehrig's disease. But we got to know Trav. Dane was a little further into the illness when we were all going and stuff, so he wasn't around as much. But Trav would come through the shops in Bend a lot, so we
Mhm.
would get to know him. And when we were there, the Dutch Bros was a much smaller company, and it wasn't the Dutch Bros it is today. So
Mhm.
we believed in the family, we believed in the culture, and we loved what we did. So it was an easy no-brainer. Hey, let's try to take this somewhere and make a career out of it.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Sounds like, I mean, you're kind of homegrown, right? You came in from early inception of the company before it grew into the brand that it is today.
Yep.
How was that like experience going from an employee, night shift employee, going through the ranks, learning the people that were involved in the inception of the company? How has that impacted you in the way that you handle operations today in the Treasure Valley?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of gave, I mean, it gave me a good sense of every position we have in the shop. So, I can relate to even today the people we hire and they get put on night shifts,
Mhm.
and I know what it's like to feel like maybe the shop janitor and you're just cleaning up
Mm.
people's messes from all day, and then I worked my way down, and so I know what it's like to open a store and change your entire life. So you're going to bed at 8 o'clock because you're getting up at 4 o'clock the next morning to go to work. And
Mhm.
so, it really benefited not only myself but my wife too when we were working together at the beginning, and just understanding all the aspects of the operation. Like, I had to learn how to run a business, but I knew how to operate the business.
Mm.
So those were two very different things of running a business and managing personalities and dealing with different types of people and banking relationships and all that.
Mm.
That was all learned once
Yeah.
we got going, but we had the nuts and bolts of the operations of the company, and that was huge. Just
Mm.
knowing all that stuff and not having to learn that on the go while
Mm.
we were trying to learn everything else.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. In moving to, when did you finally like pick up a second location? Like how long was that in the process after you started one?
So we were pretty quick in the process early on. We kind of had an interesting thing happen when we first moved to Boise. I was just my full time role was just driving around street to street, just
Mm.
looking for locations.
Mm.
I would drive up and down Broadway, Vista, Chinden. I would just be all over the place, and so we ended up finding two locations. We found a location on Broadway here in Boise, and then one on Vista, the other
Mhm.
thoroughfare from the airport down. Um, and so we were working on those. It was going through the city, and in one of my paths from a rental house we lived in at the time was up and down Chinden, and we happened to drive by old coffee shop, a already existing coffee shop. It was named Mountain Java, and just a real small little hut, and there was a for sale sign on it.
Mhm.
So I thought, well, hey, let me call them and see what's going on. And so I called the number, and it turned out the for sale sign was for the property that the shop was sitting on, not for the
Mm.
business. So kind of forgot about that. And then about 2 weeks later, driving down the same path, there was a little for sale by owner sign in the window of the coffee shop. So
Mm.
called that number, and sure enough, the owner, super nice guy, but he'd been doing it for a while and wanted to try something different. And so we made him an offer, and that shop moved real quick. So it was never
Oh,
intended for
okay.
that one to be the first one.
Mhm.
And so the timing of that, we opened Chinden in what was it, February of '07. 6 months later, the Broadway or the Vista store opened, and 3 weeks after that, the Broadway store opened. So
Mm.
our first three that we had kind of originally thought maybe one a year,
Mhm.
all three of those packed into the first 6 months. So
Wow.
that was uh, that was a trying time, but
I bet. Yeah.
it's a blessing now looking back. But at the time, it was chaos.
Wow. So what kind of lessons would you say that, or a lesson you could say that sticks out when you're talking about growth versus scaling, right? Because you didn't give much room for growth before you just decided to scale up a couple. What's one of the biggest takeaways?
Man, we did. I mean, we made so many mistakes, and I think that's part of it, right? You have to
Mm.
make mistakes and learn from it, and I mean, just being able to be humble through those mistakes. I
Mm.
mean, we came from an environment in Central Oregon at those Dutch Bros locations that they were setting records every day of sales, and I mean,
Mm.
just through the roof. And so we were working in that environment, and then moved to Boise to open, and it wasn't the success that we thought. Like, we came into it thinking these things are cash cows, there's no
Mm.
problem, no brainer. And when we actually opened our doors, It wasn't. We were losing money every single day and
Mm,
struggling to, having to call investors because we had payroll coming around. And, it was a very humbling time for myself, for my wife. And, we took a lot of time and sat back and said, did we make a mistake? Were we, not wise in bringing Dutch Bros into Idaho? Because we were the first ones here
mm,
to do it. And, we luckily, I mean, we prayed a lot about it, and that I believe in that wholeheartedly. I think
yeah,
we all have our path and our mission, and
yeah,
uh, but I think going back to working for the company before, we had that base in there, and we had just the not just the reliance of the HQ team to come out and help us, but uh, we really believed in the culture and the story of Dutch Bros, and we really believed in the one customer at a time mentality.
mm,
And so we just had to start there. We just had to break down and get over our egos and get over all that and humble ourselves to the fact that we just need to win over one customer
mm,
every day. Let's get
mm,
one customer to commit to come back the next day.
yeah,
And that snowballed. And that's what truly started our success, was just that one customer at a time.
yeah,
Just try to blow them away with a cup of coffee.
mm-hmm,
And what that comes down to is just blowing them away with personality. Just
right,
get to know them, find out if their kids are in soccer or football or whatever they're doing.
mm-hmm,
Um, get to know their name, their drink, and their story a little bit. And back then we had time to do that because we
yeah,
weren't busy. So a car
mm,
would pull in and we would have 5 minutes with that car if they wanted to stay. So
wow,
we were able to build that one car or one customer at a time.
mm,
So that was a huge, I mean, just letting go of the ego was huge.
mm,
And it's hard. It's hard to, go home every night and realize you're failing and you're constantly
mm,
failing. And, to wake up the next morning and be motivated to go back in. And it just turned into that game with the customer. And my mindset wasn't
mm,
going in every day like, I want to make this much more today in sales, or
mm-hmm,
it was, I want to see Susan come back and find out about her kid's soccer game and see if Tom,
mm,
finished that project at his house or whatever it was.
yeah,
That became the game, and it took my mind off the focus of the money side of it.
mm. That's interesting. It makes me think, as from being a franchisee, your marketing engine and the branding is not necessarily the same as what somebody else is doing, starting something from scratch, right? So you building those relationships and the customer service that you're putting out, that was kind of looks like a core tenet of your branding mechanism and your marketing. With that, is that safe to say?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, from a practical standpoint, somebody that's listening to this and they're right in the throes of it, and if we were to give them some insight behind effective communication and time management from a business owner's perspective, like what advice would you give somebody when it comes to that?
I mean, communication's huge, right? When we started out, I was the manager of the first store we opened because that's just one, we had no money to pay anyone. So my wife and I had to work for free. So
Mm-hmm.
I managed a crew. We hired about 12 people when we first opened. We had to scale that back to about 6 because we just didn't need that many people. But, communicating with that small team was relatively easy at the beginning, right? We were all hung out together. We knew each other, this and that. So fast forward, we hit about between shops 4, 5, and 6, kind of right in there. We hit a huge blow up in how many people we needed to hire and all that. So, I mean, our employee base almost tripled in
Wow.
like 3-week period because of those
Mm,
shops. And so communication changed a little bit. I could no longer communicate with everyone and stay in
mm-hmm.
close proximity. So, we had to step back and look at our organization and say, okay, what can we do now? And so we instituted some regional manager positions so that they had kind of pods to look over. Some of that original system still lives on today,
Mm,
but the whole point of it was realizing that I can no longer effectively communicate with everyone. So I need some type of system in place where I can communicate with a small group and they can
Mm-hmm.
take it out. So, so that was really big. And you said communication. What was the other?
Time management and how that kind of relates
Oh,
to it. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, from the time management side, same thing. I mean, I was able to control a lot of stuff until we had that fifth store. I could oversee a lot of stuff, and um, we got to that point, and there just wasn't enough time in the day. I couldn't keep going. So, kind of the same thing of knowing what I was able to give off and give away to someone else. It's also hard though because I'm a control freak and I like having control of everything I can have control of, and
Sure.
that's a very hard thing to step back and give up some control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but every time I did it, things got better, things got easier, our sales went up, our team was happier, and so it was just kind of a lesson after a lesson after a lesson of every time I gave something else up for somebody else to, it freed me up a little more to one, do what I enjoy more, and it empowered those people so they took it and ran with it, and so that was big for me. And so now I'm sitting in a place with, we have 14 stores now, we have two in the works right now to build, and we'll have probably 3 or 4 more after that. And I get to concentrate on that. I love
Yeah.
the process of finding locations, building new stores, and then being part of the building the team from
Mm-hmm.
behind the curtain. Putting the team together. So I get to focus on those things now. Where if I was
Mm-hmm.
still trying to do everything,
Sure.
I'd have no time. We would be falling behind. So.
Yeah. Wow. If you were to start from scratch, because you've learned a ton along the way in doing everything that you've done, what would be some key lessons specifically that you've taken from your Dutch Bros experience and applying to either starting this from scratch over or some other venture? What would you take with you along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to it, but it is that humbleness piece. You know, a lot of people ask because we've been very blessed with the success we have now.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will ask in, interviews or things like this, or would you change it? Would you do it different? Would you have rather come in and just been making, cash like crazy out the door? But I don't think I would, because I don't think, one, I wouldn't be the man I am today. Sitting here,
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
have the appreciation for what we have today. I truly, truly am super appreciative of where we're at, the team we've built, um, and just the customer base we have and what we've been able to do here in the East Treasure Valley. But I don't think I would have had the same appreciation for all that had we
Hmm.
not struggled early on and had to build it one customer at a time.
Yeah.
And it also helps when some of our employees come in because we deal with, I mean, let me back up just a tiny bit. We deal with, obviously, or maybe not obvious to everyone, but we're a launching pad type
Hmm.
business, right? So people don't come to us and stay for a career.
Right.
They're
Uh-huh.
here for 3, 4, 5 years while they're in college or doing whatever, and then they're going to go off and do something great. And so I get to talk to a lot of them
Yeah.
about where they're going, and then I get to follow up with them when they go
Yeah.
somewhere. And it's great because when they struggle, I can talk to them all day about that.
Hmm.
We've had some people leave us and go and just be amazing and this and that, and I'll talk to them once in a while, and I'm happy for them and all that. But I just don't have a lot to. They're like, well, what advice would you? I go, I don't know. You're killing it. I didn't kill it at the beginning, so I don't
Hmm.
know. I don't know where you're headed and what you're doing, but it can help me relate more to people that feel like they're failing and are right on the brink of like, I'm just going to give up. Like
Hmm.
for my wife and I, it was a real conversation of we were making more money personally working for the company in Oregon than we are owning
Hmm.
in Idaho. Like this doesn't seem right. So,
Hmm.
um, we can really speak to those things. So, I say humble a lot just because it's true. And it took a lot of time to learn that humbleness. I mean, to be 3 weeks into, you know, your first store and have to call your investor, who in this situation, the investor was my dad, to say, hey, we're out of money. It's a tough phone call to make.
Sure.
Especially, I was 23 when we started. So 23 years old, first, you know, real, I mean, I'd had jobs all through younger years, but first legitimate, like career type, taking a shot at this, and, you know, convinced my parents to help fund the beginning for us. And, you know, to make that call, the first paycheck, that we can't even pay our people after the first one, that's a tough call to make. So,
Wow.
luckily they believed in us too, and they love us. And so,
Yeah.
they're still a part of what we do too. As just I like keeping things in the family. So, and as a thank you for them helping out from day one.
Yeah, that's great. You know, the big takeaway that I'm hearing from you there is you sound like somebody who's more focused, and you care more about who you're becoming in the process of this thing called life versus, you know, the end result of what some people might think of why people go into business, of just simply making money. And I think that's important too. So that's cool.
Money is a great byproduct of what's happened, but it can all go away tomorrow. So we're trying to build relationships and make Boise better and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I want to leave you with the final question here, if we could, Brian, and that's just, what's your favorite Dutch Bros drink and why?
So my drinks have changed over the years for sure. When I first started, back to that story earlier, when I was in college and I would go through, we have our blended drinks called the Freeze. And we do it in all sorts of different ways. I used to get a Milky Way Freeze, which we don't have the Milky Way anymore because Dutch Bros got too popular and we started getting in trouble for using those names. So now it's the Caramelizer Freeze. So I would drink those all the time in college, but I was also 18 years old and my metabolism worked a lot faster because they're maybe not the healthiest on our menu. But I went from there, and then when you're working in the shops, I mean, you have endless supply. I tried everything, obviously, but you kind of get just focused on one key drink. And for a while, we've had all sorts of different drinks. We've done, you know, Dutch press, and which is like a French press. That product was here for a while and then gone, and that was good. But if I'm fast forwarding now to today, and I'm 40 now, so I'm getting up to the old man ages. But it for me, I'll drink just a black cup of coffee. I mean, with maybe a little sweetener in it, but coconut milk every once in a while if I'm feeling adventurous. But for me, and it's 1 in the morning, one coffee in the morning, and it lasts. It doesn't, I don't need anything else, and that keeps me going. And then my wife and I really like tea too, so we'll try out the different teas and all that stuff. So I'm not super creative, and people always aren't happy with that when I drink black coffee, and they're like, you got to be kidding me, you guys have so much stuff. And I'm like, I have drank everything we have every day for 16 years now. So
no, that's a great answer. Keep it simple. Nothing bad about that. That's great. Brian, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you jumping on board with me. And for those of you that are listening, again, you've tuned in to Behind the Business with the Boise Beat. I'm your host, Gordie Tamayo. Until next time.